Blake Lively's life took a shocking turn when she was arrested late last night. Authorities reportedly arrived at her Los Angeles estate just after 11 p.m., and word of the incident spread fast. But as the public scrambled for answers, whispers started swirling. Was Blake trying to buy her way out of the mess? While major media outlets stayed unusually quiet, likely fearing backlash, behind the scenes, chatter was intense. This wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was a firestorm. Both sides in the legal battle were knee-deep in discovery, the phase where all the cards hit the table, files, testimony, confidential exchanges. But insiders say Blake's team wasn't. Just prepping for court, they were scrambling to keep certain skeletons buried. And it didn't take long for speculation to kick in. Some sources hinted that Blake's team may have withheld key materials, details that could have tilted the case sharply in Baldoni's direction. It felt less like due process and more like a carefully staged chess match, except the rulebook kept changing. Then the real shocker dropped. Judge Louis J. Lyman threw out two of Baldoni's major claims. No deep analysis. Just a casual dismissal with the vague excuse that they lacked relevance. But these weren't minor details. These were claims that could have flipped the whole case on its head. Naturally, eyebrows went up. Was this incompetence? Or something more deliberate? That's when the rumor mill kicked into overdrive. Some speculated corruption. The judge's dismissals seemed too convenient, too casual. Was he influenced? Was someone pulling strings from behind the curtain? Suddenly, this didn't feel like a standard legal battle. It was beginning to look like a legal thriller. It's complete with power plays, secrecy, and shadowy deals. And then came the twist no one expected. Connections between Blake Lively and Judge Lyman. Yep, multiple sources close to Baldoni's team hinted that their relationship may have extended beyond the courtroom. Strategic meets, shared acquaintances, and rumored closed-door conversations sparked one burning question: was Blake leveraging her celebrity status to quietly tip the scales in her favor? The whole thing started sounding less like a trial and more like a script from a high-stakes mob drama. Manus the suspenseful music. Now, to be fair, these are just allegations for now. But it didn't take long for the internet to grab hold and run wild. The story was too juicy to ignore. Blake, once admired for her poise and charm, now found herself in the middle of a storm, involving alleged corruption, questionable tactics, and potential abuse of legal power. Suddenly, the media couldn't get enough. Supporters and critics clashed online. Some swore Blake was being targeted unfairly. Others believed she was manipulating the system in plain sight. Regardless, the damage to her reputation was already undeniable. And then Baldoni's legal team took things even further, accusing Judge Lyman of outright bribery. That's right, not just rumors, but a formal charge that shook the case to its core. What had already been a wild ride became a full-blown scandal. Legal experts were stunned. Proven true, this wasn't just a blow to the case, it was a blow to the entire justice system. The accusations prompted an official investigation into the judge's conduct. Suddenly, the courtroom drama took a backseat to a much larger question: had the legal process been tainted from the beginning? With public faith on the line, the investigation quickly became the center of attention. The consequences stretched far beyond Blake and Baldoni. This was about institutional integrity. Investigators wasted no time. Discrepancies in the judge's rulings and procedures details that seemed too odd to ignore. The inquiry began probing whether Lively may have had any undue influence over Lyman's decisions. Coincidences started piling up, and it was getting harder to dismiss them as accidents. With no clear answers, the public's trust began to erode. Supporters rallied behind Blake, arguing the scandal was engineered to destroy her career, but others weren't convinced. They believed the trial had become a stage, the outcome already manipulated long before it reached the courtroom. The real debate had shifted from whether Blake was guilty to whether the system was even working. That bribery claim changed everything. What once felt like a celebrity defamation case now looked like a legal drama with national implications. For Blake, the pressure was mounting fast. And the deeper investigators dug, the more it felt like the surface had barely been scratched. Just when things couldn't get any more chaotic, authorities launched a surprise raid on one of Blake's luxury restaurants. At first, it seemed unrelated, but officials later confirmed it was directly tied to suspicions of financial misconduct and potential connections to the bribery probe. This was no random inspection. It was a targeted effort. The optics were disastrous. Her public image, already frayed, took another massive hit as footage of law enforcement entering the building went viral. Reports confirmed that officials weren't just there to look at receipts. They were hunting for evidence that might link Blake's business dealings to the court scandal. It was clear investigators were widening their net. The emotional toll was showing. Witnesses said Blake was spotted leaving the scene visibly distraught, her expression hollow, her eyes brimming with tears. The raid had crossed a line from legal scrutiny into deeply personal territory. And at that moment, it became clear this wasn't just a courtroom crisis. It had become an all-out war on every front of her life. Facing bribery allegations, having her business searched by authorities, and enduring public fallout all at once. It's the kind of pressure that could crack even the most composed person. Blake Lively, once Hollywood's picture of elegance, now stood under a spotlight no one wants. As for her restaurant, things weren't looking any brighter. Though the venue stayed open despite the legal probe, its future looked grim. The cloud of suspicion looming over it wasn't exactly drawing crowds. Patrons weren't just questioning the role the business may have played, they were reconsidering whether to support anything tied to a scandal this large. Blake's once polished image, which used to draw admiration, now felt like it was slipping through her grasp. The raid brought deeper questions. What would be the long-term cost of this saga? Her restaurant, once a shining example of her business savvy, now sat beneath a storm of controversy. As investigators pushed forward with the bribery probe, it became clear that both her personal and professional lives were hanging in the balance. Public opinion split rapidly. Some saw Blake as a scapegoat, someone being unfairly targeted. Others believed the accusations held merit. One thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. As for the restaurant, its survival was a question of time. Raids like this are difficult to recover from. While it technically remained in operation, the stain of scandal had settled in. Now, the once pristine establishment was forever linked to a web of allegations. For Blake, it was yet another burden she'd carry. The glamour that once defined her was now a distant echo. Blake Lively was facing a journey ahead that would be anything but smooth. Everything shifted into chaos with her sudden arrest, charged with bribery and obstructing justice. The timing couldn't have been worse. Tensions in her legal case were already sky high, especially with the ongoing investigation into Judge Louis J. Lyman's conduct. Her arrest became the headline of the hour, adding fuel to an already burning media frenzy. No one saw it coming. The moment was seismic. Just when it seemed the story had hit its peak, Blake Lively was suddenly in custody, staring down charges that threatened everything. What began as a high-profile civil case had now exploded into a criminal investigation. The arrest wasn't a footnote. It was a major turning point that suggested law enforcement was now taking this far more seriously than anyone expected. What made this moment so impactful wasn't just Blake's celebrity, but the weight of the accusations. Bribery and obstruction aren't minor charges. They're severe offenses in the eyes of the law. The charges were reportedly tied to her alleged involvement in influencing the judge's dismissal of key elements in Justin Baldoni's case. With that connection under intense review, her role in the courtroom dynamic was now front and center, legally. The arrest was backed by Section 134 of the U.S. Criminal Code, which deals directly with bribery and the corruption of public officials. The law prohibits the offering or accepting of benefits in exchange for official decisions, a serious federal crime. Charging Blake under this statute was more than symbolic. It showed that prosecutors were taking an aggressive stance. It didn't matter how famous she was, justice, they said, would be impartial. The media moved fast. Blake's arrest was everywhere, with TV anchors and news sites diving into every angle. It wasn't just a courtroom issue anymore. It was cultural, fans, critics, and legal experts all weighed in. Everyone was trying to understand how the star known for her grace had landed in the middle of a legal firestorm. The arrest was more than a plot twist. It was a cautionary tale of celebrity and scandal colliding. Blake's attorneys immediately switched into crisis mode. The arrest was a devastating blow, but not a final one. She was quickly released on bail, avoiding jail time for now, but the charges weren't going anywhere. Her legal team now had the enormous task of managing her image, fighting serious accusations, and building a defense under public scrutiny. Their approach shifted fast. With the bribery and obstruction charges at the forefront, her lawyers focused their energy on disputing the claims. They argued the arrest was part of a coordinated attack meant to ruin her name. But every step they took was under a microscope. The court wasn't the only audience, so was the world. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Once known as Hollywood's sweetheart, Blake's reputation now hung by a thread. The charges alone didn't guarantee a conviction, but they did mean a long, exhausting legal battle was ahead. Her lawyers prepared for a drawn-out fight, trying to prove her innocence. They could pull it off remained to be seen. Would she clear her name and restore her image? Or had this arrest marked the beginning of a permanent fall from grace? Bail allowed Blake to avoid incarceration, but her legal troubles were only just beginning. With each new development, the narrative grew more complex and the public's fascination grew. The future of the case teetered on a knife's edge. The next court dates would be pivotal in shaping Blake's fate, either paving the way for redemption or sealing the damage to her legacy. Her name was already tarnished, and the arrest had only deepened the impact. Her legal team was now fighting not just for her freedom, but for her future. Proving the charges false was essential. If they couldn't, the consequences would be catastrophic. From luxury endorsement deals to major film projects, everything was at risk as she pushed through the legal maze. It was clear Blake's life had veered far from the red carpets and designer gowns. Once the epitome of stardom, she now found herself battling criminal accusations in courtrooms. Whether she would make it through the storm, or be consumed by it remained the biggest question of all. One thing was certain: this arrest was only the beginning. What came next would determine whether Blake Lively could survive the scandal or be permanently undone by it. The fallout was swift. Her financial and public image took massive hits. Once cherished as a Hollywood darling, Blake was now the central figure in a legal controversy gripping the nation. What followed was a spiral no one saw coming. The arrest marked a turning point, and for many, it was the final straw. As the media frenzy exploded, the once adored image of Blake Lively began to unravel. Public perception shifted almost overnight. The actress, once celebrated for her charm, grace, and sense of style, now stood at the center of an unraveling controversy. Longtime fans were left confused, torn between the Blake they had adored for years and the serious accusations now tied to her name. She had once been the face of sophistication, but now that face was plastered across headlines linked to bribery, misconduct, and legal manipulation. The betrayal felt personal for many. How could someone they trusted, someone they saw as genuine, now be wrapped up in such a high-stakes scandal? The story dominated every media outlet, from major news programs to celebrity gossip columns. Blake Lively had gone from beloved starlet to public warning. The speed at which public sentiment flipped was startling. As the case progressed, the damage to Blake's image only deepened. The same relatable persona that had once earned her admiration now seemed questionable. Her authenticity, once a given, was now being dissected in online forums and talk shows. The divided opinions added fuel to the fire. While some still supported her, clinging to the belief that she was being wrongfully targeted, others had already written her off. What started as a legal battle had morphed into a moral debate. Who was Blake Lively when the cameras weren't rolling? But the fallout wasn't limited to public opinion. Her financial empire was collapsing just as quickly. Once a top-tier figure in brand endorsements and luxury partnerships, Blake now found herself radioactive. Companies that had previously competed for her name and likeness were rapidly cutting ties. The scandal had made her too risky. Deals that had been cornerstones of her brand vanished overnight. Collaborations were canceled, contracts paused, and negotiations abandoned. The financial consequences hit hard. The once steady stream of endorsement deals had dried up, and major projects she'd committed to were shelved. What had once been a thriving income supported by smart investments and collaborations was now in serious jeopardy. The brand she had built, an extension of her carefully crafted public identity, was in free fall. In an industry that values both talent and appearance, Blake's fall from grace wasn't just personal, it was professional. The media that once adored her now seemed eager to document her decline. And the public, once enamored with her every move, was beginning to lose interest. Blake was no longer the face of elegance. To some, she was now the face of scandal. Rebuilding her brand, even in the best-case scenario, would be a long and uncertain process. Whether or not she could ever regain her former status was anyone's guess. Amid all the turmoil, few figures in the entertainment world spoke up in her defense. Some celebrities, both inside and outside Hollywood, voiced their support. They claimed she was being unfairly singled out, or that the media had exaggerated the situation. Some framed it as an attack on her success, or as part of a larger pattern of tearing down public figures. Others simply sympathized with the immense pressure she was facing under constant public judgment. Still, for every supportive voice, there were just as many opting to stay silent. In a place like Hollywood, where reputation is currency, many chose to keep their distance. Former allies now avoided any association with the scandal. Supporting Blake had become a gamble, and one most weren't willing to take. Those who had once proudly stood next to her on red carpets were now weighing the potential cost of showing loyalty. One looming question lingered throughout the chaos. Should Blake speak out? A public apology might humanize her, win back sympathy, and signal accountability. But it also came with risks. An apology could be taken as an admission of guilt, especially given the seriousness of the accusations, and silence could be read as defiance or indifference. It was a delicate situation with no clear right move. Her legal team understood the stakes and played it cautiously. They floated the idea of a public statement, but hesitated to pull the trigger. With her reputation already bruised and the legal case still unfolding, they knew one misstep could be irreversible. Now, they kept their options open, carefully watching public reaction, weighing each possibility. And so, the apology that might have made headlines never came, at least not yet.